I am Bill Wilson, and I'm one of the Wilsons of the Wilson firm of Wilson Wilson Estate Planning and Elder Law. The other Wilson was my dad, who started the firm in 1963. And as you may know, we concentrate in the areas of estate planning, which includes business succession, elder law, and special needs planning. We have offices in LaGrange and Northbrook. So this afternoon, we'll discuss the important topic of business succession. You know, after all the time and attention you've devoted to your business, you don't want to be left with any uncertainty when the time comes to sell. To get to this point, it's important first to prioritize and understand what you need to know. Bianca Benedetti Fong of UBS will give a short presentation, and we will then have a panel discussion with Kevin Doherty of UBS and myself, followed by question and answers that you are certainly welcome to ask. Again, questions and answers will come through the Q&A feature. And Kristen, I guess you will manage that. And again, this will be recorded and will be on our website. And I don't know if you guys put it on your website or not at UBS, but certainly it's there for us, for our anyone that wants to see it or hasn't seen it for the first time, they can come to our website. Let me tell you a little bit about Kevin and his firm. Kevin is a very successful financial advisor at UBS. He leads a 30-year-old wealth management practice based out of Oak Brook that helps individuals and families navigate the economic, political, and social challenges of today's world. One of the biggest challenges Kevin and his team are often faced with is helping their clients navigate the exit from their businesses. We've asked Kevin and a couple of his team members from UBS to join us today to help us prioritize and understand what goes into a smooth transition from your business. On Kevin's team is Kristen Plotkin and, as I said, Bianca Benedetti Fong. Kristen discovered her passion for helping others build confidence in their future, and particularly when it comes to their wealth early on, and has committed to doing so for UBS for over a decade. As a financial advisor, along with Kevin in the Doherty Group, her goal is to help individuals and families achieve optimal financial results through a coordinated and collaborative approach. Bianca is a director in the UBS Business Owner Client Segment Group. In this role, she is committed to understanding and addressing the unique financial needs of founders and entrepreneurs. In addition to working with hundreds of business owners to help them grow, build, and sell their companies, she's also a third generation business owner family. So she has certainly some individual and personal background in a family business, and that I'm sure helps her advise her clients. So I'm going to give it over to Kristen, and we'll go from there.
Great. I will share my slides here momentarily. And then Bianca, feel free to take it away once you see those.
Oh, okay, perfect. Thank you so much. So just kind of want to take a quick step back, set the stage here. My team was created because we really recognize that the financial journey of a business owner is typically going to be very different and in some ways much more complex. And having worked in wealth management for over 10 years and being from a third generation business owner family myself, I have had the unique privilege to get to sit on both sides of the table, right? Being the advisor and also being the advised. And I will be honest, as the one that's being advised, I am always struck by the ideas, the resources, the solutions that are being brought to me when I'm on the end of receiving. So we kind of have recognized that historically business owners have been underserved in the wealth management marketplace. And essentially, you know, they've been tried to kind of squeezed into this one size fits all box. And the mandate of our team is first really to understand the unique needs of business owners. And then secondly, to get them the resources and solutions they need to thrive at all stages of business growth. And most importantly, monetize their life's work if they have an opportunity to exit. So we actually titled this presentation Uncommon Success, because while thousands of businesses are created in the United States every day, it is actually not very common to build, grow, and monetize a successful business. So if we want to really quickly get into our next slide, certainly you can read the stats yourself, but I think what's most important here is that many business owners are not prepared for their next steps. Most have never had a formal valuation or an appraisal, and I think many may have also had, thoughts about what they think will be happening to their business, like one of their children will take it over, but they haven't actually planned because they've never actually really had that succession conversation and asked outright, do you want to run this business? So if you're one of those business owners that hasn't started to plan, certainly you are not alone. And as we move into that next slide, I kind of want to reiterate this point, because business ownership typically takes over the majority of hours in a day, and it's understandable that you may not have created a plan for exit yet. And that may simply be because you think that the exit is far off. And I always love this slide because 9% of the business owners that we surveyed said they are never exiting their business. And they truly believe that, right? But we know that everyone exits their business. And I don't want to be morbid and talk about death, but the reality is everyone has to exit. So since over 50% of privately held companies in the US are owned by baby boomers that are nearing retirement age, it's important to address your timeline and start to plan. And in terms of the market today, I think it's really important to say that right now we are seeing record volumes of transactions and very high multiples for business sales. So on the supply side, there are many sellers that are interested in exiting. And this, of course, is coupled with favorable rates, as well as large amounts of capital that are ready to be deployed from private equity firms, family offices, and strategic buyers. And really what we're seeing right now is this match on the supply and demand side, creating what has commonly been referred to as the exit boom over these last few years. So if we move into the next slide, I think if you're going to try to take advantage of this market, particularly before it starts to slow down again, you should be putting a plan in place. And I think in the same way that you would create a goal for growth, I would encourage you to put together some goals around exiting. You can see from this chart, typically as a business owner, you will get one, maybe two chances to monetize your business. So you really want to make sure that you're creating a plan to get it right the first time. And if we go into the next slide, I think key to really creating that plan is understanding what are the goals that I want to accomplish, right? And what are the resources and also the money that I would need to accomplish these goals. So if we go in one more slide, I think what we're really trying to do is break down the most effective ways to help business owners maximize liquidity events. We want to bring you the best resources to help you understand what makes a business valuable. How have our clients executed fair and profitable transactions? And what components really come to play from a financial planning perspective that have made all the difference? What learnings have we found from our exited owners that can help you to avoid common mistakes and take advantage of opportunities? So hopefully some of these stats have given you a good understanding of why we're here today. And I'm absolutely looking forward to discussing more ideas, providing some advice, along with getting some insights from Kevin and Bill on how you can best take advantage of opportunities as you start to consider your transition options.
Great, thank you, Bianca. Let's go ahead and move into our panel discussion now. I think, as Bianca kind of mentioned, the goal here is making sure, as she mentioned, just, why it is critical to be kind of thinking about business planning and what it all means for a smooth transition, but also that you have, from this discussion, have some kind of steps that you can take to help you along the way, and also that you feel kind of that you have people in your corner that you can turn to for guidance if needed. So let's go ahead and get started. Bill, the first question is going to be for you. And that's going to be, what are some of the common hesitations to getting started on a succession plan?
Well, I think Bianca underlined at least one of them, and that's denial. And the denial that I'm never going to quit. I'm never going to be someone that does not work. And that seems to be a big one. The other one is they don't want to make hard decisions, okay? Especially when it comes to family. Who's going to be in the business? Who isn't going to be in the business? If one of the kids is going to take over the business, what do we do with the other child that won't be in the business? How do we compensate that child? So these are hard decisions, and certainly there are people out there at UBS that can help you facilitate those different aspects of these decisions. Another one is just when people think of exiting, they think of an overwhelming amount of work that has to be done. And there certainly is an overwhelming amount of work, but people have to remember that you have advisors and you have people that'll help you with getting things on track, and also to just basically hold your hand through the whole process. And the fourth one is they just aren't able for some reason, either health-wise or for some other reason, that they can't seem to pull the trigger. And we have people that have been disabled and they're still head of the still head of the company, and they're so distracted by what's going on with themselves that the business of exiting doesn't really come into their mind. So those are the four main ones that I see.
Great, thanks, Bill. Kevin, Bianca, anything that stands out to you in terms of common hesitations for why people, common hesitations to get started?
I think Bill touched on a lot of them. I think the overwhelming and denial are probably are two big ones, and we see it with other types of financial decisions as well. But it's a one that definitely sticks out at the top of that heap is when it comes to business owners thinking about the next steps. And I think one thing that actually part of our practice is my father is a financial advisor also, who just turned 70, and so we're starting to have these discussions and have been having these succession type of discussions over the last handful of years, and putting plans in place. And I think a lot of his hesitation came from just that sense of finality of hey, it's over, or it's coming to an end, which I would struggle with also, quite honestly. And so something that's really helped in our conversations is just separating succession planning and exit planning. Just because you have a good succession plan in place doesn't mean that you are immediately exiting the business. It just means, hey, if that kind of, I think it was Bianca that mentioned, hey, some exits are involuntary, and we usually don't know when those are going to happen, right? So the more prepared we are, the better. So I think that's, certainly that sense of finality is something I've seen personally within our own practice, but I've seen it with just folks in general with retirement, but I think especially with business owners.
Yeah, and the only thing that I would add too is that very oftentimes see business owners that are really happy, you know, with what they're doing right now and the work that they're doing. And it's, you know, it's something that you just kind of want to put off because everything is going great now. But to Kevin and to Bill's point, you just don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And so it is really important to have that plan in place, not just for your exit, but also just, you know, for the general growth and, you know, profitability of the company as well.
Yeah, great. Thank you all. Kevin, next question for you here. Just taking a step back and discussing exit planning a little bit more broadly, what's at stake for business owners as they consider their options for an exit?
Sure, I think Bianca kind of just touched on one of them, and it's the future of the business.
Yeah.
You know, both in planned exits and unplanned exits. It's you know, sometimes the business owner can be one of the key salespeople also, or the key operations people, and there's just a lot that goes into it, and sometimes estate planning issues can impact the future of the business if not enough planning's been done and changes need to be made. So I think that's probably the one that sticks out quite a bit, is just the future of the business, not just the future of the business owner's kind of financial path is at stake, but also the longevity and the likelihood of that business continuing on the same path is a huge part of what's at stake. I think that a lot of times ties into the legacy kind of aspect for a lot of business owners, and that they want to see the business carry on, but there's also that personal sense of pride in the business that they have. You know, we've seen it become a bit of a risk on the legacy side. We've also seen some business owners think of it as more of an opportunity. If, hey, as I exit, this allows me kind of a platform to put a stamp on my legacy and move forward into the next stage in our lives. So I think that, you know, becomes important for the business aspect of it, but I think also, and a lot of times, just that a lot of businesses have a family component to it, especially privately held businesses. Is there's the legacy within the family also too. So I think there's a kind of business and the family legacy that's certainly at stake. I think also there's just the potential to miss planning opportunities. I think Bianca's team's great at kind of pointing out and addressing, hey, if we have enough lead time to take a deep look at your personal financial situation as well as the business's situation, hey, are there smart things that we can do from a tax standpoint if there is going to be a sale of a business or passing on to a next generation? There are some estate planning components to it as well that should be thought about. If there's a charitable intent, there's some things you can do to both minimize taxes and maximize charitable gifts, you know, if enough time is there. We've come across a couple business owners in our work where it's, hey, the business sale's closing a couple weeks from now, you know, I finally got it done. Now I'm ready to talk to you. Or the other version of that is, I know I've been blowing you off for the last year, but I just sold my company for $15 million. What should we do? And we see that happen often, because like Bill said, it can be an overwhelming process. So sometimes people take it piece by piece and say, hey, we'll get to the life after the business when the business is fully sold, and we think, hey, you really need to start thinking about your financial plan well in advance of that. So I'd say those three things are extremely important, and I'd wrap the fourth one into the overall picture. And something Bianca mentioned is, hey, a lot of business owners are just happy, right? They've had a lot of success in building their business. They've created jobs, provided jobs, help people take advantage of opportunities. And some of the research studies we take a look at point to sometimes that happiness doesn't carry on after the exit from a business. We actually have one research study that we can actually, I think, send out as a follow-up after the conversation that took a look at a couple hundred business owners that had exited, and the simple question of, are you happy with the way it went? Are you happy with where you're at now? And over half said no, which is pretty startling, right? And so I think overall happiness gets tied into that, not to pull in the emotional side of things too much, but I think it's a huge aspect that can't be overlooked. We had a business owner get bought out by a private equity firm in our client base in the last year, and he's going through some of that struggle where his life's work and life's meaning's now kind of behind him, and he's trying to figure out what's next. And I don't think he's fully said he's depressed yet, but he said it's just different. You know, it's an extremely different state that he's in now than he was just 6 months ago. And it all happened pretty quickly for him. So I think those are a couple of things that just can, with proper planning and having the right mindset and having the right conversations can kind of maximize those things as much as possible.
Excellent. Thanks, Kevin. And we'll, after this question here, we'll pause for some question and answers. So feel free to type them in or raise your hand if any come up along the way. Bianca, this next question's for you. I think in just meeting with a number of business owners, we find that, you know, there's a number of them that have a good, clear idea of what their business is worth, but I think most of them, it's not really clear for them. From your perspective, what makes a business valuable, and why do you think it's important to have a business valuation done? And kind of to tack onto that, for those who may have never gone through the process, where should they start, and how often should they look to have their business valuation done?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that is a fantastic question, because there are very specific things that go into making businesses valuable. And of course, that will vary by industry. But some of the things that we advise that owners should consider as they near an exit is really like, what are the actual components of transferable value within your company? And when you really distill that down, what this actually means is, if you as the owner are going to exit, what are the components that would still be of value to a potential buyer, right? And so that's what we're really talking about when we're saying transferable value. And that can be things like, you know, hard assets like equipment, warehouses, widgets. It can be proprietary software and patents. And we also look at relationships that a business has established, right? So who are your clients and customers? What is the value of long-term contracts you may have? What is the diversity and concentration of those customers or contracts, right? Is it one big customer that if you were to lose them, you know, the whole business would be in jeopardy? Also, what is the amount and diversification of your trusted suppliers if those are needed, right? So there are many different aspects of transferable value, but high level, I would encourage owners that are nearing an exit to consider, you know, what am I managing at this company? And what would the state of the company be if I were to leave? The more you set the company to stand on its own with a key management team, with you know, a great succession plan, with stable employees, with established reliable suppliers, existing contracts, diversified customer base, all those things will help increase the value of your business to potential acquirers. And I would say the second part of your question is really very important, right? Why is it important to have a business valuation done? So I cannot tell you the amount of times that an owner has told me with absolute certainty that they know how much their business is worth. And then when we really start to dig, and I love that Bill is smiling here. I think when we really start to dig, you realize that essentially the number that they have in mind for their business value is based off a conversation, you know, maybe it's at a country club with somebody who has a similar business, or a direct competitor who just sold their company. And the truth is, you know, we all really do know no two businesses are alike. And for all of those things that I just mentioned, everything from that proprietary assets to employees, to suppliers, to customers, that is all going to make your valuation look very different. And so I would absolutely encourage owners to have an informal valuation assessment of your company done at the very least, so that you can have, you know, maybe it's just confirmation that the business value is where you had anticipated it would be. And I think from there, it's also smart to really follow up with a plan that's mapping out your long-term goals for yourself, for your family, right? Kevin, you and your team do this really well. So your clients can very much see, from the value that I'm getting on my business, does that number actually get me to a place where I could exit and where we could sustain the life we want from a financial perspective? And in terms of kind of updating that informal valuation, I suggest doing it every 2 to 3 years. That's kind of just maintenance for your financial plan, for your insurance policies, which you want to make sure still cover the needs as the business grows. And then, of course, as you're nearing an exit, you certainly want to work with a professional and a formal business valuation. So you can get into any discussions with a potential buyer, understanding exactly how much you are worth. It just makes for smarter negotiation.
Excellent, thank you. Bill, did you have something to add there?
No, I was just laughing because it's like your house, you always think it's more valuable than it really is.
Yeah, and an investment banker we work with always likes to use the comparison that every person you know and most business owners you know can tell you what their house is worth, what not every house on the street, but what the last couple houses that sold in the neighborhood sold for, what their plan would be if they're going to go out. They know realtors, they kind of have that all figured out, but oftentimes their business can be a much bigger asset than their house could be, not all times, but in certain cases, and that same level of understanding isn't there. Which I think is a good parallel.
And to be fair, we've seen it go the other way too. We've seen business owners come to us and say, my business is worth 2 million. And then we do our due diligence, we get, some insights, and we find out, no, it's actually worth 5 or 7, but somebody came to them and said, I would buy it for 2. And that's kind of what they think it's worth. So it goes either way. But I think the smart thing is like really kind of do your due diligence, and whether, it can certainly be an informal valuation. Kevin and I and the team talk about this all the time. It doesn't have to be, a huge project, but you should know, kind of where you stand.
And I think in addition, I guess not to add on to too much, but I guess the other thing too is one of the more commonly misunderstood pieces of information or misrepresented pieces of information we see too is a lot with the multiples that people expect in different industries, right? And it's very common for somebody to say, we expect some 7 times multiple of a figure, and then we talk to folks like Bianca, and they say, no, what's happening in the marketplace is actually 3.5, and that's better to use for our planning purposes. So I think there's that aspect of it too that can help with just getting an understanding of, hey, what's going on in the marketplace currently. And I guess got back to some of the slides that Bianca pointed out earlier is, hey, is this the opportune time to potentially take advantage of or not, right? So depending on your situation.
Yeah, and also sometimes we will say, well, we've seen the deals where, you're at 7x, right? But these are the key areas that you would need to work on in the next 12 to 24 months to get there. And I think that can also be really helpful because, we're saying, look, we're not saying this hypothetically, we're saying based off of deals that have closed and what we're seeing in the marketplace, this is what's valuable to buyers right now. And I think that can be really helpful because, look, none of us actually know what's on the minds of anybody else. So to have that insight into what a buyer is looking for to get you to a higher multiple can be very valuable.
Definitely. I don't see any questions at the moment in the Q&A feature. Kayla, I'm not sure if you have any in the chat feature.
I do not at this moment.
Okay, thank you. But want to remind you all that feel free to raise your hand or type something in at any point throughout our conversation today, and we'll pause to read them out for everybody. Our next question, Bianca, is could you just, and we've talked about a little bit about some of these already, but what are some of the opportunities and the risks business owners commonly overlook? What do you see from your findings?
Yeah, sure. So I think there's a lot, right?
Yeah.
In terms of risks, the first thing is I will say, we've sort of level set. Many business owners will only have one business sale in their lifetime. So you probably will only get one bite at the apple. And I think you just don't want to risk leaving a lot of money on the table, right? This is in many cases your life's work. So to mitigate that risk, I would really suggest working with an experienced team. And a lot of owners want to go with sort of like who they've trusted along the way. And that's part of it, right? You want to have a good relationship and trust with the people that you're working with on this hugely significant transaction. But you also want to have someone who has experienced a business sale, right? Specifically, and many, many times. It's, really the same thing that I say to my kids in sports, practice makes perfect. So you want to find that team, that accountant, that attorney, that investment banker, that financial planner to make sure that they have experiences in executing sales. And I honestly ask them for details, right? So as somebody who's been on the other side of the table and interviewing people for a business sale team, I always ask, what are common mistakes someone in my shoes would make? And I don't need somebody who's gone through easy sales, right? Like I want someone on my team that has seen it all, and most importantly, has learned from it and can help me not go down that same path. Also, I would say on the risk side, it's really very hard to sell the business when you're running the business. We oftentimes see a lot of issues in due diligence. So it's a risk to not have the time to get your financials and all of your information in good order. I've definitely seen deals go south because all of that info is not buttoned up. And, I think if the deal goes south, then oftentimes the owner is also in a really bad place in their business because they haven't been paying as much attention to the company over those last, 60 days. So be very careful. Do not go at it alone. Build that really experienced team. On the other side, in terms of opportunity, I think a lot of owners are so focused on the dollar value of a business sale, right? Like that number, that they forget there's going to be quite a bit of that will be deducted in taxes. And Bill touches on this, Kevin touches on it. I think it's a huge opportunity to start planning early on. Before you have an indication even potentially of what a business is worth or any sort of letter of intent on the table, meet with a professional to go over what the tax efficiency strategies are that you can implement before the transaction, and make sure that more proceeds from the sale actually go to the people and the causes that you care about. Kevin said that people sometimes come to us even after the transaction has been completed, and we have to say to them, like, we're so happy for you, congratulations. It's too late for us to save you a lot of money. And that's really unfortunate. So it's a huge opportunity. There are strategies that I didn't even know existed. Right now, for instance, we are selling a property and working with a team to execute a 1031 exchange, which will help us to defer capital gains if we reinvest the proceeds from a sale into a like-kind property within a certain amount of time. We also have a ton of clients who use donor advised funds. And I know Kevin and you and your team work on this all the time. A DAF is a very simple, flexible, tax efficient way to give to your favorite charities. And so, if you aren't finding out about the planning strategies that can be implemented for a large lump sum transaction, you're definitely going to be missing out on that big opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. Kevin or Bill, anything to add there? I know there's a lot of kind of opportunities and risks that we've talked about as we're preparing for this.
I think Bianca did a great job.
Yeah, great.
I think we have a question here.
We do, yeah. I was just going to say, the question here, is there any kind of general timeline for a business sale once the decision is made to go forward? So Bill, I think this might be able to tie into the next question in terms of what does the roadmap towards an exit usually look like?
Yeah, there usually is a what I call a critical path to selling a business. And the first part is the pre-transaction segment, where you should get together with your financial advisor, your accountant, and your valuation specialist to get a feel for taxes, for what you're going to do with the money that from the proceeds, and again, that valuation that Bianca talked about. And this is even before you meet with an attorney. So once you meet with an attorney, which is, I think, the next step, we do like a pre-checkup. So we organize the books, make sure that everything is in order, and it would be easy to when it comes to due diligence, it'd be easy to look at these certain items. Also, what are the key disclosures we should talk about? Are there things out there that we should disclose? Are there patents pending? Are there lawsuits? And one of the big ones is, should we tell the employees? And if we should, which employees should we tell? So that becomes a large consideration when you initially meet with the attorney. So let's say we do get a buyer, okay? I would always have the buyer be checked out to see whether this person is really able to go through with the deal. And you can ask for financial statements, stuff like that, or just informally talk to people. But you know, if you have a buyer, you go through all the steps involved, and if you can't come up with the money or whatever, it's just a waste of time and a lot of money. So say we do have the buyer, what we do is we enter into a letter of intent. Okay, we call that an LOI for short. And that letter basically puts down what we call it, it's like a term sheet. What is the transaction going to look like? And it's mainly the economic terms, whether there's going to be a bank involved, whether it's going to be a cash deal, how much is, what's the purchase price? Is there going to be a down payment first? All these different types of considerations that we put in the letter of intent, which is basically the whole concept of the transaction. Then we go through a due diligence phase. And this phase can be painful. What usually happens is the buyer sends a list of things that he or she wants to see. And it's usually financials or outside contracts, employee contracts. They want to see what's out there in your business to make sure that there's nothing that would be a surprise. And I always tell my clients, this can be unnerving because people are going through your almost personal data, but we always try to keep the client to stay calm. Just another point is that you may have a corporate lawyer, but maybe that person isn't the right attorney to handle this type of transaction. So you need a transactional attorney, and that corporate lawyer may or may not be the one, but always keep that in mind. So we have the due diligence, okay, and we finally come to an agreement. We put an agreement together, a written agreement. It's signed, and we usually set a closing date after that. And at that closing date, the transfer documents are signed, and there could be a non-compete. Okay, there is many times they don't want you going off and starting a new company down the block. So many times you see a non-compete. So don't be surprised at that. I always want to impress upon the seller that you need to have your financial advisor ready to go at closing. There's nothing worse than having a ton of money sitting in your checking account doing nothing, trying to figure out what you're going to do with this money. So that's why I always say get that financial advisor online even before you talk to an attorney. So that's basically the roadmap or the critical path. Now, how long does it take? Well, usually the due diligence part takes the longest. It depends on how big of the company it is. I've seen 45 days for due diligence. I've seen months. So it really depends on what the buyer thinks is a legitimate time for him or her to really look at the business and to see whether this is a business that is worth buying. So in answer to your question, it's a typical attorney answer. It depends. So
there's a lot that goes into it, huh?
yeah.
Great. I think, you talked about kind of having the right attorney. We talked about having the right people along you to help identify opportunities and risks to be thinking about as you approach, building out a plan. Kevin, how should a business owner build out their team of trusted advisors, and who should be on their team? And then Bianca will ask you to add on after Kevin.
Yeah, I was going to say I might just kind of rope together some of the answers that Bianca and Bill gave,
Yeah.
but I think it's one of the more common mistakes we see is people using the same professionals that they've always used to try to do something that they're not used to doing. So I think that's something you have to go into realizing that most of your professionals would love to be a part of the deal that you already work with. Few are going to stick their hand up and say, this isn't really my expertise in line of work. Some will, and they should be commended for that. So I think it's, in some cases, parts of your team may be experienced in doing it, but I think you want to approach it with that lens of you're going to need to do due diligence on the team that you put together. I think one of the first steps I always like to recommend is just kind of try to determine who's going to be the quarterback of the efforts. I think that's something we see commonly just happen commonly with business owners even before a sale, is just that they have a variety of different concerns. They have a variety of experts that they work with, but it's very rarely done in a coordinated effort. And I think that becomes even more important with a transaction as big as this. So I think kind of determining who that quarterback may be. Sometimes it's a financial planner, sometimes it's an accountant, sometimes it's an attorney, sometimes it's a member of the business that says, hey, I have enough time to kind of spearhead the effort and make sure everybody's on the same page. But without that, I think it becomes hard to truly coordinate and move all together in the same fashion. So I think that becomes one of the first steps you want to do is determine, hey, who's going to be the quarterback of this effort. And I think, like Bianca said, you need to sit down and interview people, ask them the tough questions in terms of, hey, what good experiences do you have? What bad experiences do you have? Can you walk me through some examples where you've been able to add value to these type of processes? And talk to a handful of people. Ask the people you trust, for recommendations as well. If you need help getting pointed in the right direction in our local vicinity, certainly we have tons of connections to in our professional network to share with you. And so I think those are all extremely important aspects of that team. And I think something that Bill mentioned is you want to have a team that's experienced in doing transactions. I think at the same time, when you're looking at a financial advisor, you don't want a transactional oriented financial advisor. You want a financial advisor that's very relationship oriented, that's been through a lot of transactions, if that makes sense. And what I mean by that is, so commonly we see business owners have this kind of team and ecosystem that gets built around them, and can, sometimes these processes can last a year or two or longer. And so they become very used to having a lot of resources at their disposal, a lot of people reaching out to them to make sure things are going smoothly or to follow up on what the next steps are. And then the sale happens. A lot of times, most of those professionals go away. And the example I gave earlier of the guy selling his business and kind of having some emotional challenges, he's feeling a bit of that too. It's hey, where am I turning? I had all this advice, I had all these people that made me feel important and make sure I was doing the right things. And now it's just me and my financial advisor and maybe my accountant still. So that's why I think having a good, strong relationship with that financial component, like Bill's mentioned and Bianca has mentioned, becomes extremely important, because they're going to be there before and they're going to be there after. And hopefully you're working with somebody that can work with you, can work with your next generations, and kind of keep that success moving forward. So I think that becomes important. And I guess to give an attorney answer on who should be on the team, and I'll probably lean on Bianca a little bit for it, but that can also depend, right? In terms of what type of transition you're planning on making, that team can vary. But I certainly think having your accountant, attorney, that's has a lot of experience with deals become a core part of the team. But then sometimes an investment banker can come in, sometimes valuation specialists at different parts along the way become extremely important. So there's a handful of folks there, but like I said, I'll lean on Bianca a little bit too to kind of fill in the gaps in terms of the core core group that she thinks leads to the most success.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, Kevin, I will say you kind of touched on all the high points there. But two things that I also just kind of want to reiterate, you know, you're mentioning the quarterback and the situation. And I think that that is so important because you do, you know, you are kind of bringing together all different professionals that may not necessarily have worked together before, or maybe they have, you know, and they didn't have a great relationship. So you want to make sure that there's some sort of cohesion within the team, that all of the different professionals that are working know what, you know, what one hand is doing and the other. That's really important. So you want to make sure that you have somebody there who's going to help to bring everything together. And it can't always be you know, because you're used to, you know, wearing a lot of hats as a business owner, but when you're going through this very emotional, very complex transaction, you need to, you know, really kind of rely on the team and having that point person to help guide everybody to where they need to be. And one thing that I will say to kind of add to Kevin and Bill's points of working with people who are very focused on transactions specifically. You know, I would love to say it's an anecdote, but this is an actual story from my family. My grandfather went through a large transaction and he worked with all of the people that he had trusted for a really long time, you know, from an accounting and a legal perspective. And after he executed the transaction, years later, he's now 94 years old, he still talks about how he didn't feel that he was able to donate to a lot of charities that were really important to him because he wasn't sure that he was going to have enough money to support his family and his 3 children who are also starting their own businesses. And it just breaks my heart because we know that if he had worked with, you know, really seasoned professionals that had done this all the time, he would have been able to bring to them, you know, these are my objectives. I want to take care of my family and I want to donate money to these causes that are so important to me. And they would have figured it out for him. They would have figured out a way to make it work. And so when you're putting together your team, make sure that you're going with people who have done this, you know, many times. Practice makes perfect. And also make sure that, you know, the people that you're working with have worked with clients that are even larger than you, because that means that they know, you know, what the biggest opportunities are. And that if you do get to a place where, you know, you're a larger company or you have more opportunity, they can still continue to help you and they'll know all the strategies that will make sense for you. So I think that's really important.
Excellent, thank you. We'll pause here one last time for any questions and answers. I don't see any at the moment in the Q&A feature. Kayla, do you see any in the chat?
Not at this time.
Okay, great. We'll go ahead then and kind of wrap things up. I think the last thing, it's kind of a quick question for all of you, is just what are some of the important takeaways that the owners here should know for themselves, for their business, and for their family, kind of regardless of where they're at in the business life cycle?
Yeah, I guess the way I like to think about these things, and sometimes life in general, is I always like to think about the concept of drift versus design, and I think that's a very applicable concept when it comes to business owners and their transition over the course of time. And it's you can drift to some really good places in life, but usually when you're drifting, you don't end up where you would have chosen at the beginning. And so I think if you put some effort and some work and some thought into designing what that can look like, especially with, you know, situations like these that can be very complex and have a lot of moving pieces, is the more you can design, which is a lot of what we've talked about, right, is getting ahead, doing planning, designing what you want versus where you may drift to. I think that concept to me has always hit home when it comes to these type of processes. Is it's pretty easy to pick up one of the phone calls that you get as somebody that wants to solicit buying your business and get enamored by it and start drifting down that path, right? And but I always like to think is, hey, take a step back, ask yourself the questions: what's important to me? What's important to me now? What's what do I want to do going forward? To Bianca's point, are there organizations that I'd really love to support, or family members I'd really like to take care of through this process, and start to just document what's important to you. A good financial advisor should ask you all those questions. But I think as you do that, then it gives you kind of the strategy and the roadmap to say, hey, are the paths we're taking and decisions we're making getting us to where we want to go?
Great. Bianca, Bill?
Kevin, I just wrote down drift versus design. Every time I work with you, I feel like I learned something new. So thank you for that. That's something I'm going to take with me. But Kristen, to answer your question, for me, I kind of agree with Kevin. It's really all about, if you're a business owner at any stage of growth, whether it's your second day on the job or you're getting ready to exit, it's all about taking a quick step back and knowing what you want, right? Like for your family, what do you want your personal legacy to be? For your employees, for your company legacy, really think about, I built this business into something that, I should be proud of, but what do I want to be known for? What do I want to be remembered for? And I think that will really help you to dictate what some of the terms of your sale are or your exit are. Maybe you consider taking a smaller lump sum and adding in a clause that your employees are taken care of and have job security for a certain amount of years, because that's what's important to you. To Kevin's point, we do see owners leave a company with their name on the door and they just watch it be completely changed by the new buyer. I mean, you have to keep in mind, somebody is buying your company because they think that they can manage it better and grow it bigger than you can. So, at every stage of a business, I would encourage owners to just understand you will exit. Everyone has to exit a business. So really think about what you want, create that plan, and surround yourself with the best team to execute that plan.
Well, you guys took away some of my takeaways. So just a couple things. Don't let death or disability be your exit plan. That's something that you really, and that goes into the denial and that whole concept. And again, prepare, and you're going to have tough questions, okay, and tough questions to answer, and just be aware of that. But you have these advisors with you that can help you through those questions. And whether it be if it's a family business, whether you convene a family meeting, which is always a great idea, or some other type of road you want to go down with one of the advisors. That's what they're there for, and they've seen it 100 times before, so they know what you're going through. So lean on them, and that's basically my takeaways.
Great. Thank you all for those. Bill, I think we'll go ahead and turn it back over to you to close things out, unless anybody has anything to add here.
Was there?
Thanks, Kristen.
Did you see another question?
Let me see.
No, it's just someone thanking you guys for a great presentation, and they had to sign off, but they're just thanking you guys for doing a great job.
Oh, that's always nice.
Thanks. And thank you, Bill, for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh,
Yes,
you're welcome. And again, thank you for everyone participating today. Again, this is our February monthly webinar. We have one every month, and we'll certainly have one in March that we will send out notices about what the topic will be and the date. And everyone have a great weekend. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.